Hey gang, Grizz here for another quick little video here, or it might be a little bit longer than usual. So it's that time of year. The tables are all cleaned off, as you can see, so it's going to be rubber season coming up. I've got about 40 or 50, nothing stupid like last year's adventure there. That was way too much work. So as you can see, all the tables got fresh melamine on them, the fresh side actually, all lined up, all cleaned off. I always try and make sure before I start that the floor is nice and clean and there's no dust. I blow the place out a couple times with the big doors open to get the dust out of the room, and try and keep it as clean as you can, because it's frustrating if stuff gets mixed up into your rubber while you're working. So this is just going to be a video about basically my setup. I've shown it in bits and pieces before, how I start out, but I'll just do a complete one with everything I use right here, so you can sort of see if you're in. I know there's all different skill levels involved in this. People have been doing it for years, and some are just starting out, so it's probably more an advantage, this little video, for people who are just starting out and can see what I use for setup. So I usually set up this little booth here with a little spotlight in it that I'll shine on my piece. It depends on the model. This is the kind of shellac that I use right here, the Zinsser brand. It's just easy to spray on. I just put the model on a little turntable, a little Lazy Susan, and you can spray. The light just lets you know that you've got a good coverage on it. I don't always spray everything. It depends what it is. Usually if it's something like glass or with a really slick surface, or a surface, sorry, like a glazed pot, like a pottery pot that has a really heavy shiny glaze on it, I'll do with this, but mostly I wouldn't. Like, actually, this is just a demo thing. That's concrete. I wouldn't spray that. I'd just go with straight rubber right on top of that there. So that's your first step, and then I'd let that dry out for a day before I let it hit the table. So they'll just keep going along here, sort of what else I do for my setup. So I always bring out all my little tools and utensils, things you're going to need as you go along. I usually like to start off with simple glove molds first, right? So glove molds with no seams. Then I'll work, like, I'll try and get those all on one table. And then the second table I'll go to pieces that need one seam. And then usually I'll leave this for bigger models, or like 2, 3, 4, or 5 seam, whatever. It's the more complicated ones here. But I always start down on the end and do the simple glove molds first. Just sort of gets you in the swing of things for the start of the season there, since you haven't done any for like 8-10 months. So, and then these are just the pieces that I like to have pre-cut up for mounting. When it depends. Some pieces, like, I'll just stick right on the melamine, and then you can work around it. But sometimes it's a pain in the neck. So you can see over on the table there, I've got all those little Lazy Susans to the left over there. So I'll just mount my piece right on top of either a piece of melamine, these little pieces of hardboard. It's really cheap. And put them right on the Lazy Susan. Then you can spin it around and do a 360 on your piece, and get good coverage instead of trying to bend your head over top and see what you got going on. I mean, this stuff's really cheap to buy, and it's got a shiny side, so put it down on the shiny side. I used to do I have plexiglass. I had years ago big sheets of plexiglass that I had from the house, and I cut them up in pieces. I still use some, and I went last year, I think, to go buy some plexi, and wow, I nearly had a heart attack when I seen how expensive that stuff was. So try and stick to the cheaper materials, like the melamine and the old hardboard there. It won't cost you too dearly. So this is the silicone I use just to secure, if I'm putting them down on the tables or on one of these pieces of wood or melamine. You don't want your model to be moving around. So I just use this, a couple little dabs of silicone underneath, or if it's got a bit of, sometimes you got like an 1/8 of an inch or a 1/4 of an inch gap underneath, I'll fill it with the silicone just so the rubber doesn't tuck too much underneath it, because then you've got to do a lot of trimming after, so it just saves you the time. So that's the brand I use. It doesn't have to be the concrete one. There's one for gutters or whatever. But what I like is the 30-minute ready one, because you can do them in the morning, and in the afternoon you're working on it, and it's set up enough it's not going to move. These are some of the other little things I use. These are my registry keys that Guns made me a few years. I try and keep them all. so I didn't have to bug them like last year. I lost a bunch, so I had to get them to remake. So, but I've got them all organized this year. Your brushes, of course, assorted chip brushes, or from 1 inch, 2 inch. I don't use much more than a 2 inch. Gets too gummed up, too good, too big. Now for seams, I use, I think I've talked about it before, I use just like catalog paper, or like a little, whatever this thing is called, brochure thing here. I just use that paper for doing my seams. So I just have like little craft scissors, and these things come in handy. Different kinds of tongs for, or tweezers for getting into tight spaces. I always keep some clay around, just a chunk of clay. It's great for filling little holes fast, or a little gap that you need in a hurry. Just keep a ball sitting on the table. For fixing like pinholes in your model or little defects, if it's concrete or plaster, not resin, but concrete or plaster, I just use this stuff. It sets in like 15 minutes. So you can put it on and sand, like fill a little gap or a hole, and in 15 minutes you can sand it and it's ready to go. It's pre-mixed, easy peasy stuff to work with. Instead of mixing up plaster and chucking it out, it's to make a little tiny bit. It's a pain in the butt. The NIOSH mask is I only use it if I do a lot. Like if I have about 30 models at a time going on, and you're doing coat rubber, you can get pretty heavy with ammonia in here. So sometimes I do throw the mask on. If I'm only doing a couple pieces, I don't bother because it's a big room and it's pretty well ventilated. But when you're doing, 20 plus models, it can get pretty stinky in here and it'll give you a headache. So just if you want to protect yourself, get yourself a good NIOSH mask for organic vapors to protect yourself. So here's all the little Lazy Susans. Some are mounted on boards, some are just loose, like so. I'll slap it down on the table, right? And then you can just put your piece of melamine on, and then your model's on top, and away you go. You can get your 360 and do your piece. You don't have to bend over too much. And probably last but not least is everybody asks all the time, what kind of rubber do I use? So if you're in the States, you're out of luck. This is in Canada. I don't know where else you can get this after. This is from Ontario, from Sculpture Supply Canada. I've tried finding someone closer to me, like in BC or Alberta. No luck so far. So even the name Burma Rubber comes up under Sculpture Supply Canada. So I don't know if they're part owners or it's a partnership or what. It's good stuff. Never had a problem with it. They have two kinds, right? There's the FMF. That's their thin kind. Sometimes you'll do your first coat in thin if you want to pick up a lot of detail, and then after go on to your thick. And their thick variety is the FMB. It's nice. I like it. I use it for most models, right? And then if you're FMF, if you've run out of the thick one and you've only got thin left, they also sell a thickener called Thixo, and there's a ratio on it, tells you what the mixing are, and you just mix it with like a paint spinner on your drill, and it's good stuff. Works out good. So anyway, it's that time. The rubber will be hitting the road here in a day or two. Probably a little later this afternoon. I'll be spraying some stuff. And I'll try and keep everybody posted as they go along. If there's any questions, you YouTube folks, you can ask me in the description down below. And on DIY molds, you can just send me a message. All right, gang, take care.